I would see some people that I went to high school with over the years, and I'd like, oh, you should try yoga. They're like, yeah, no, never, never. And then sure enough, years later, I would see them and they're like, oh my God, I finally started yoga. It changed my life. It really does have that capacity.
Hi, everyone. We are here today to have a very lively conversation. I have Marni Task as my guest, and I am really interested to hear how this all goes. It's very much of a relaxed conversation you get to listen in on and learn lots about health and wellness and living a very high quality life. So welcome, Marni, and I'm really happy to have you here. And if you could just start out with giving us a quick snapshot of who you are, where you came from, how you arrived in the particular position you're in now, bring us right up to date.
I got to health and wellness by way of acting. I went to New York University as a BFA major, and part of my acting training was yoga. And yoga really gave me the entryway into the health and wellness field. I would even say, now I'm trying to remember, I feel like even having some alternative roommates began my health and wellness journey, maybe amidst my yoga journey. So I've been practicing yoga since the late 80s, early 90s. You know, it's interesting. Part of my journey was that when I grew up, I'm actually in Cleveland, Ohio right now. So I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. I lived in New York City for many years. And then I've been back in Cleveland now for many years. So I'm back here. When I grew up in Cleveland, I was riddled with eczema. I also didn't know that this was a problem, but if we're talking health and wellness, it's good for people to know that pooping is everything. When I started getting into Ayurveda was one of my very first dips into the health and wellness world. And Ayurveda means the science of life or the science of health. I went to my first Ayurvedic practitioner trying to get rid of my eczema. And you have to fill out a form that says so many different things, like the shape of your eyes, the color, you know, the texture of your hair, what foods you like to eat. Are you drawn to salty or sweet? And of course, it asks you things like, how often do you eliminate? At that point, I was a once a weeker. I didn't know that that was a problem. You know, I knew that I had problems as a kid, you know, that my doctor, I did choose like suppositories and things like that as a very young kid. But like, you know, then whatever, it just was the way it was. Part of my journey at this Ayurvedic doctor said, okay, man, the first thing we're taking care of is your pooping problem. You know, so that was when I started drinking lemon water every morning and, you know, drinking it all day, you know, basically drinking it all day long and doing many other things. And so, you know, here I am all these years later, still doing many of the things that I learned back then. My mother-in-law, this is so interesting. I just got back from a trip with my mother-in-law. You know, I actually thought she knew this about me. I always call myself a sugar addict in recovery, although I'm not always in recovery. I know many people that are like, you know, they give up sugar, like, you know, the bad sugar, and they are forever no longer eating it. I mean, there's many people, including me, you know, when I have given up sugar, like give up dates, give up high sugar fruits, things like that. Anyway, my mother-in-law was like, what? How is this possible? You're the healthiest person I know. I didn't even know that you were somebody who was like addicted to sugar, if you will. You know, getting off of sugar and, you know, meeting this Ayurvedic practitioner, all of those things were sort of the beginning of my journey. So it's really like an ever evolving practice, if you will, of health and wellness. That was the beginning of my yoga health journey. And then in the mid 90s, I started teaching because I was so inspired by the yoga practice that then I wanted to share it with others. Out of that desire to bring balance and health and happiness to others, I created an aromatherapy product called Indu Aromatherapy. And so I've been making that for many, many years and never planned on it being something that was going to be sold ever. But like so many people were in love with the product that I thought, well, maybe I should put this in a bottle and sell it to people. And then many, many people asked for it to be made in different forms. So now there's many different products under the same name.
That's very cool. So that's your primary business right now, is manufacturing and selling these blends of essential oils?
So I do a few different things. I still teach yoga. I'm also what's called an exchange facilitator. So part of how the word yoga means union. And so yoga has introduced me to many different communities. And I was introduced to a community called Exchange. And the Exchange approach is this amazing organization that teaches something called appreciative inquiry. And I would call appreciative inquiry, it's a methodology actually created by a man named David Cooperrider out of Case Western Reserve. But it's a methodology where you can use appreciative inquiry to ask questions of yourself. So the word inquiry, like to inquire, instead of using depreciative inquiry, like asking a question of like, what's wrong? What's wrong with this situation? What's wrong with her? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with this system? And in general, you could use appreciative inquiry on yourself personally, or you can use it in a business or in a system or in a world, if you will. I am one of their trained facilitators, and it's a wonderful way to bring groups of people together. Instead of, many companies, you think of the top down, there's a CEO and there's, high level, and we're going to do it this way. And I know all the answers, to be the sage on the stage person at the top. But what many have been finding, many people around the world have been finding, is that the more voices that you have in the room, the more people listening and conversing with each other, not only do you bring people together quicker and solve problems faster, but you find more harmony. You find literally what I would call more yoga. People get along better, people work better together, they feel better individually, and then they, have better lives personally and better lives in their work environment. So I'm doing that as well. So my life is sort of a combination of yoga. This weekend, I'll be leading people, teaching people how to teach yoga, which will include me teaching philosophy, teaching them different therapeutics, literally for if you've got an injured shoulder, like what poses to do and or what not to do, and even some hands-on adjustments that a yoga teacher might offer a student to help them heal their body. So I do that. I'll be leading that this weekend. I'll be teaching an ancient text called the Bhagavad Gita, which, funny enough, when I was introduced to this exchange approach, there's so many organizations, especially, when you think of these CEOs and everybody who's a C-suiter, if you will. Mm-hmm. I never even knew what that word meant, what that term meant years ago, the C-suiters. And they do these people that are in the C-suite running these big companies like Google or United or, you name the large corporations that you and I hear of. So these leaders do leadership development. When I've been in some of these rooms listening, I'm just the yoga teacher that had been hired. So then I'm in the room listening to all of these leaders being led, and I'm one of the people guiding them. But then I'm listening to their leadership talk, and I'm like, wait a second, do you guys realize what you're talking about is right out of the Bhagavad Gita, is right out of the ancient text called the Yoga Sutras? That there are these ancient texts that probably, because they've been around for thousands of years, people took them, they had wisdom that they grokked out of them, and then they turned it into the language that they turned it into. So what I've noticed is that a lot of leadership development has been fine-tuned with our American language, our English language, if you will, and probably into other languages. And so that's what I think of as this appreciative inquiry and exchange, facilitating in like the highest yogic way of all, using your heart and your mind to create heartful connections with other people. So not just getting good at standing on your head, but can you get good at connecting with others? Can you get good at being kind to others, which, by the way, shows up in many of these yogic books?
The exchange thing sounds like somewhat of have you ever heard of Ubuntu?
I have heard of Ubuntu. Yeah, do you mean like in terms of like the methodology or what it means, or is there like an organization called Ubuntu?
It's actually a book that was written, and it's all about contributionism. So what are you contributing? You're there to share, to get value to other people, and the exchange is what's happening. And it's really interesting that all these things that have been learned by these people who have had to figure out the chain of command and to make sure that everybody's supported all the way down to the very bottom of the company is all based on the same principles that have been in ancient texts forever. And they may not have even known that existed. They would be better off to go and read those up front and really, instead of having to reinvent the wheel all the time. But it's a natural progressive approach that happens in business. And I'm the CEO of Activation. We're a small company, but each company is really the same. Each company has different departments, and each department has to have somebody that leads that department. No department is allowed to tell the other department what to do, but they need to know what each department is doing, and then everything flows properly. So that's quite a challenge. And if you have any kind of turnover, that really interrupts the flow. The idea is to have somebody stay for good and also enjoy the ride up. So they're not just an employee or putting all their life energy into something that somebody capitalizes on, but rather it's an exchange of energy at a proper level, and everybody gets to, buy into it. When you're bought in, then you have passion. Everybody needs to everyone's got a super gift. Every person has a super gift. Most people don't find it because they're so oppressed, and they don't get to discover what their super gift is to get it out there, but then some people do. So we encourage that very much for people to find out what's that thing they have, that great attribute.
Right. Well, and now, again, these are some of the things that I've learned over the years, that there's so many of those, I don't know what you would call them, the strengths finders, the Myers-Briggs, there's all these personality tests, if you will, kind of show you your unique piece of the puzzle. And so maybe some people know what that is even without taking that test. But like when at least again, overhearing some of these leaders talking, when you've got somebody who's got this piece of the pie, like they're a leader and they're a people person, and they're like one of my strengths is that I'm a winning others over kind of person. But that my number one thing is connectivity, which is so funny because I'm all about yoga and bringing people together and figuring out how I can help people connect them with other people. But some people are not that. Everybody's got what it is that is their unique strength. And so if we can, each of us get in our own lane, the lane where we thrive the most. Right now I happen to be sitting, and to the right of me is my backyard where there's all these trees in the backyard. And I always, jokingly equate humanity to plant life. And if I was a cactus, but you put me in a rainforest, I'd be dead. You take a fern from the rainforest and you put it out in the desert, it would equally be dead. But if you put them both in their natural thriving environments, it's like if you put a fish in a tree and expect it to fly like a bird, it's not going to happen. And you don't have to get mad at the fish for not flying. You just need the fish to be in its right environment for thriving.
Yeah, so we each thrive in certain environments. That's really cool. And each personality is so different to be able to contribute their special piece of the puzzle that fits with other ones. And the unity is the fitting of the pieces of the puzzle.
What's so interesting? So you and I met on another podcast on, what is it? Make America Healthy Again, right? Is that what it was called? It's such a funny play on another phrase like that with Beth Shaw. It's just so interesting because I have a workshop that's coming up in a couple weeks, actually. And interestingly enough, it's an Ayurvedic workshop, which is, going back to my story at the beginning. I'm going to be leading this, we're calling it a yoga dosha workshop, because according to Ayurveda, each of us, instead of doing a Myers-Briggs or a strength finders, you answer these questions, and a trained Ayurvedic doctor practitioner can look at you and see, it's like a botanist can look and see that my jade plant is very different than the conifers, than the evergreens that are in my backyard. And so when you know what somebody's type is, when you know what their dosha is the word in Ayurveda. And dosha actually means that which causes disease. So it's like, where's their weak link in the chain? Paradoxically, it's also what is their strength? It's like their double-edged sword. So I'm leading this workshop in a couple weeks where we're going to teach people a little bit about Ayurveda and all the different possibilities, whether you're what's called a vata, which means air and ether, whether you're a pitta, which means fire and water, or whether you're a kapha, which means your earth and water. And depending on your dosha, it's important that you eat for your dosha, similar to plant life that I was talking about before. And equally, it's important to live a life that's helpful for your dosha. So like if you're somebody who, so I tend to be fall under the category of a vata. That means very airy and ether. I tend to be very quick and erratic, and I'm sure you've already noticed that about me, very spontaneous. And so for somebody like me, I'm like a hummingbird. So it's great to be that fast and furious sometimes. But for people like Vatas, the double-edged sword is that they can get literally like a firecracker, like they could, implode, so to speak.
Mhm.
And they can get very anxious and not sleep and get dehydrated and not eliminate, like all the things that I was sharing with you earlier.
Mhm.
So there are yoga practices, literally the yoga prescription for people that are vatas, people that are more airy like. And so there's this practice that I'm gonna give to people to help them to balance out their doshas. So everybody will kind of understand each of the doshas. We'll do it, and then there's actually going to be a meal that will be nourishing for all of the doshas. At least that's what my understanding. So there's things that you can eat, just like you wouldn't overwater a cactus, but you might, like right now next to me, I've got like this lovely little orchid, right? They don't do well in full sun. They do good in partial sun with a little bit of water, maybe once a week, like the one ice cube, or right? So when
Right.
you can learn those things, then you can keep your life in balance. Now, I think, the little bit that I got to hear from you when we were on our talk with Beth was it sounds to me like the salts that you have help to also balance people out to create health and wellness.
Yeah, that's correct. Well, it's the raw material your body needs to produce high volumes of blood, much more than you would normally produce. You produce blood with your bone marrow, so it's fuel for the bone marrow. And then it's also a hydration factor because hydration is based upon the quality of the electrolytic fluid in your body. 80% of your body is fluid, it's not water. And you don't have water in you, you have electrolytic fluid and it's full of electrolytes. So if you were to drink water, that will diminish the electrolytes. So you take water and add unrefined sea salt to it, you drink that, now you're hydrating at the highest level. And it also is the raw material your body needs to produce very good quality HCl, hydrochloric acid, in your stomach. Your stomach runs at 1.5. Now you're digesting your food properly. And then it goes in and cleans out your whole gut system. So you're squeaky clean within 6 months. And then I just keep doing that because the air we breathe is what's really taking people out. I'm not talking about breath work. Breath work is very important. I'm talking about the 11,000 liters of air you breathe every day that is full of nanoparticles from obvious pollutants like tire dust and brake dust and cremated bodies and whatever. So when you produce enough blood, it gives your body intelligence, the ability to go, oh, I've got a lot more blood than normal. So then it can dump dirty blood. So your blood system cleans right out in the first few months, and then your lymphatic system is allowed to dump its garbage into the bloodstream. And then every cell is allowed to dump its garbage into the bloodstream because it's clean. And then the body just keeps producing more clean blood. Then that cleans out your kidneys and it cleans out your liver. And you wash the filters clean. We're not like a car where you can change parts. But cars are a good analogy in a sense, but they're not alive and they can't heal themselves. Our body being alive can heal itself continuously, but it has to be supported to do so. And most people don't have the master keys to really understand how that works, or that, that the body will continue to get healthier and healthier into the future as long as we provide these raw materials for it to work with. As far as your life, if you were to give me your top practices that you've learned about to, get into a really healthy body and the things that were sustainable, because I've learned about a ton of different practices that were not sustainable. Number one, they weren't fun. Number two, they were too much time, energy, and money. Number three, I wasn't going to keep doing them forever, so I would dump them. And they also weren't the highest level. So in your life right now, what are the main practices that have stuck, that held really well, that you enjoy doing and you see huge results from?
Well, I would say it's so funny because the only practices that, not the only, I mean, it's a big practice, is the yoga practice. And under that umbrella of yoga are many things. So the asana practice is typically what people see in pictures when people think of yoga. I don't have to sit, I'm sitting cross-legged now. I'm not sitting in lotus, by the way. There are many different yoga postures that help every part of the body. When you think of, you and I were, before we even got on the Zoom call together, we're talking about aging. And one of the things that is supposed to happen when you age is that you have to watch out for osteopenia and osteoporosis. Well, if you do weight bearing of your own body weight, and I typically weight bear on lots of different parts. I'll weight bear on my feet. So I'll do different postures like a downward dog or a warrior stance where you're really heating up the muscles and the muscles are pulling on the bones and you're asking your body to hold you up, and that definitely helps. I do a position called downward dog, which is basically like an upside down V where your hands and feet are on the ground. So you get feedback right up to your arms into your upper back where you're doing weight bearing. I don't even do great handstands. It's so funny because I have a friend staying with me for a few days who is just, when you think of like a yogi, he's the picture. He floats into the air, like a handstand, middle of the room. I don't even do that after 30 years. I still don't do that. I just go up against the wall. There are many other practices like twists and forward folding over the body, doing back bends. I mean, there's so many different things that, really in my heart of hearts, if I could practice yoga like I did back in the day when I was much younger and I started yoga, I used to practice for about 2 hours, almost 2 hours a day. But that was because I was like, in my 20s and I was such a, I'm still a free spirit, but very much a free spirit. So those practices are the physical asana practice. Some argue that it's like the lowest on the totem pole. And I don't have to argue about it. I just think the proof is in the pudding. Over the years, many people, I think here I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in a nice little suburb. And, I would see some people that I went to high school with over the years. And I'd like, oh, you should try yoga. They're like, yeah, no, never, never. And then sure enough, years later, I would see them and they're like, oh my God, I finally started yoga. It changed my life. It really does have that capacity. This weekend, like I said, I'll be leading yoga teacher training in addition to leading yoga teacher training. So I'll be teaching Friday night from 5 to 9, all day, 9 to 5. I'll have couple little breaks in there, but not many. And then Saturday night, I will be chanting. I will be singing in the language of yoga to this lovely guy over here, little Shiva. I'll be singing many different sacred names for grace or love or God or whatever you want to call it. I will be singing from, probably 7 to 9 or 7 to 9:30. Pretty much, nonstop. Now, some people would say, oh my God, how do you even do that? And for me, like, it's super energizing because it's my practice. Mm-hmm. The chanting is a yoga practice. So when you say, what are you doing now? What is sustaining you? I don't do that practice every day. I am somebody who, if you think of, what you were saying, some of these things, you kind of let go of them for many different reasons. I'm somebody who loves to practice with other people. So I do practice on my own, which, by the way, the yoga practice is free. Once you learn it, it's helpful to have a good teacher, one who's maybe a few steps ahead of you. Really, it's a practice that you can do on your own and you become your own researcher, if you will. I still do the asana practice because literally if you do it, it rinses out literally you twist and you can feel your liver squeeze, and then you twist the other way and your diaphragm muscle gets a massage. I mean, every part of your body has the potential to be exercised and cleansed and rinsed and purified, if you will. There are these other practices that not everybody knows about, like the chanting that I'm going to be, I'll probably be in a room with 40, 50 people plus our band. You've probably heard that expression, sound body, sound mind. According to science, you and I are made up of sound, that we're vibrating all the time, that we have a frequency. And I feel like you could probably talk more about that with the salt. The salt probably has a particular frequency. Not probably, I'm sure it does. This particular practice is called bhakti yoga. It means the yoga of devotion. So I'll be singing these sacred names, but just the sound alone, what I like to say is this sacred sound drowns out the other chatter in the mind. So you and I, according to therapists, according to neuroscience, according to lots of people, apparently we think about the same 10,000 unconscious thoughts a day. This meditative practice where you chant, it's called japa, where you repeat these sacred words over and over and over again. It gives the mind something bigger and better to chew on. And in addition, you get a sound bath by making your own sound from the inside out. And then you're in this room singing with all these people. So you have the sound bath from the outside in, from the inside out. And what most people say is, I mean, it's cathartic, it's healing. They feel like their heart, emotionally, they feel lots of deep healing. They're mentally, they feel more clear after it. So that's definitely a practice I do. Meditation, pranayama are breathing practices. And actually, this is so funny, but I was just on vacation with my family, and I was with my in-laws who are 82, 83. And my father-in-law has a hard time sleeping at night. He has a very interesting schedule. Like, he'll wake up very early in the morning. He'll go to sleep. He'll probably take like a little cat nap throughout the day. And then we jokingly say he'll take a cat nap from like 7 to 9 p.m. Then he wakes up and he watches TV till like 12 or midnight. Then he'll go to bed and then he'll wake up. So we were having this discussion about also that he's older. And so sometimes, you know, when you're older, but who knows, maybe you have the answer to this, because sometimes he has to wake up in the middle of the night to go relieve himself and use the restroom. And then when you go back to bed, can you fall back asleep? So I actually taught my mother-in-law and my father-in-law specific breathing practices for slowing the mind down, slowing the heart rate down, so that the body can turn on its parasympathetic response. Because when you can turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, then you turn on your rest. Hopefully you either get bored of the exercise and you fall back asleep, or at least your brain quiets down and maybe you start to slip into a meditative state. What science is now telling us, which, you know, by the way, going back to that Ubuntu book or the books that I was sharing about, that the ancient yogis have known for thousands of years that the parasympathetic nervous system, when we do certain breathing practices, turns off the amygdala, turns off that fight or flight response, and exercises the prefrontal cortex, improving our executive function and improving our ability to make choices, and even improving our ability to relax and let go so that we can heal. So I literally did that like 3 nights in a row, because we, you know, we're chatting up, we're hanging out at the pool, and then I'm hearing about everything. And I said, you know, I am a yoga teacher if you want me to come teach you. So like literally they were so cute in bed, and I guided them through some of the practices that I also do, that I'll do these practices in the middle of the night if I am having a hard time falling asleep. Because at the moment, while all these practices work and while I do them, if I'm not doing them with regularity, I'm in a human body. I'm just like everybody else. I got my own weak link in the chain. What I'm trying to do now, because I have a 13-year-old, and so having, when she was born 13 years ago, you know, my yoga practice that I used to be able to do changed. And so how do you keep filling your cup as, you know, a parent, navigating your work life and your family life, and still take care of yourself so that you can get the rest that you need and digest your food in the way that it needs to be digested? Or what are the things that you put into place so that you can, you know, live your life in a healthy way? And so these are some of the practices, and they work when you do them. And then what I've really gotten, you know, which is sort of sad and exciting, is what I've gotten to see is what happens to you when you're not doing them, you know, and when stress is getting the best of you. And then I get to be my own science experiment, put my practices back into my life, and then watch the rewards, watch my life bear fruit, if you will.
Yeah, the autonomic nervous system is such a major part of making sure your body is getting its way into equilibrium. And it's, the box breathing, 30 seconds later, you're into parasympathetic, no matter what. Very simple thing for anyone to do, doesn't cost any money. And all your practices only cost a little bit of time, a little bit of energy, a little bit of effort. and no money. You know, that's the great pursuit. You should be able to be healthy for free. And you can be, but you have to have the knowledge. Even if you're buying something, a consumable, if you find out what the true consumables are, then your cost of all the other unnecessary supplements go away. Stop spending all that money. And then your food bill drops by about 75% because your body only requires the right nutrients that make the hormonal system work better. And I've been going through this learning of master hormones. So the master hormone is leptin, Leptin, and most people have never even heard of that. I had never heard of it before. And when I ran into it, it's like, well, what's this now? Master hormone. Okay. Everybody has leptin in their body, but they can't use it.
And where is it secreted from? Which gland?
Well, it's just in your endocrine system. It's just your endocrine system overall. And you're producing too much, just like people use too much insulin because they produce too much insulin. They can't use excess insulin. Insulin is supposed to drive the glucose into the cell for energy. And everything you eat is going to be converted to glucose at some point to get into the cell to create the energy. And it can't if you have too much fat in your body. So you have to have just the right amount of fat, just the right amount of proteins, just the right amount of everything. You know, it's like Goldilocks, right?
Right.
It's got to be just right.
And by the way, that's the yogic equation. Just right. Not too much, not too little, right smack dab in the middle, just right.
And then when you find the equilibrium in those areas, that's when your body becomes leptin sensitive. When you become leptin sensitive, that now the master hormone can go to work and it sorts out all other hormonal imbalances completely. So if men are not producing enough testosterone, that completely gets rid of that problem, and they produce all the right amount. No problem at all. Women, if they're not producing enough testosterone or progesterone, because women only need a certain amount of testosterone compared to a man, and progesterone, that comes into line perfectly. So then all of the emotional issues, all the mental issues, all the physical issues that are related to hormone imbalances, they just go away. And that is all based upon, you know, having certain foods at certain times. Is very dependent also on having good sleep and the circadian rhythm of the earth, where wherever you are on the earth, you're going to be in bed sleeping by 10:30 at night. And you're going to not wake up at all. And you're going to float out of bed. So that's a whole thing that's been figured out over a 40-year period. And when I ran into it, I was like, oh, okay, well, there's not very many people who are probably going to do this. This is only for people who are truly interested in seeing their body at the highest levels. You know, any kind of protocol you do, just like yoga. Are the people willing to pay the price up front to get their body conditioned to be able to do better and better and better and better at yoga? Right? How many people take it to the levels you are at right now? Very few. If there was 1% of the population doing that, that would mean 80 million people are at your level. Do you think there's 80 million people at your level?
Do I? Oh, for sure I do.
Do you think there's 80 million that are at your level right now?
You know what? I got to check the number, but I feel like there are. I mean, I don't know. I don't consider myself, you know, I still feel like I'm the low man on the totem pole. But no, I definitely feel like we're at a tipping point where there are many more people for sure waking up. I mean, and the irony, you know, so you just said that they've been testing this circadian rhythm thing. The Ayurvedic practice that I was telling you about, of course, recommends, and by the way, that's a 5,000-year-old practice, right? People that are really into Ayurveda or who've studied yoga or has studied Ashtanga yoga know that you should be in bed by 10 o'clock, should be in bed between 9 and 10. Now, I am not doing that. So that's why I say, like, I'm, you know, like I've drunk the Kool-Aid, but not all the way. But I do have friends that do that. But they also, so they're people that are in bed between 9 and 10, and they're up by 4. So like 10, 11, 10, 11. So if you're in bed by 9, 9:30, so let's say 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30. They're up by like 4:30, 5:30 in the morning at what the yogis call the Brahma Muhurti, at God's hour, at the hour of creation.
Right, the golden hours, people call it as well. It's like the hours when nobody else is usually awake. Yeah, you get a lot done. So even 1% of the population is 80 million. It would be interesting to find out how many people internationally are doing these kind of practices and getting the success. I know that there's a very tiny, tiny, tiny number, it's in the thousands right now, who are leptin sensitive because people don't even know about it. And in order to get there, there is a protocol. And people are very, very attached to certain ways of life that is ingrained in our society that they can be released, but your body will fall in love with the good foods that are made amazingly well and know the difference between what is good for me and what is really not good for me. The things that are not good for us that are very addictive and very appealing, which are ultimate palatable foods that we really, really know are not good for us. The body just lets them go because it knows, no, that's not even food, really. That's going to block my sensitivity to leptin. And we're not going to have that. Because when I'm leptin sensitive, I feel absolutely fabulous all the time. And no matter what happens circumstantially, no problem. We'll deal with it. And we meet challenges with joy because we know we're going to learn a whole bunch. And if we have a failure, that's going to really teach us a lot. And that's probably one of the best things that could happen. How many times have we had failures that we learned so much from? So, fail often and fail fast until you don't fail at all.
That's what
Get it over with.
They say. I'm not, it's so funny because I just saw that quote again last week and I'm like, no, I don't like that.
I don't either. I hate failing.
Yeah, I feel like I'm failing forward. So wait a second though. So you've been talking about these leptins. But you said this was a new thing for you that you just discovered. How did you discover it?
It was all about timing. So, just like when you're climbing up a ladder, you got to start at the first rung. You can't jump to the 10th. It's just not possible unless you're some kind of a super athlete. With me started 20 years ago, I knew nothing about health. Anything I thought I knew about health was killing me. And I contracted a nice big tumor down in the perineum between my legs. And I got a really bad situation with heart disease. And I was only just turning 46 and was like, what's going on? And found out that the doctors, the medical system couldn't assist me with that. And they were offering the same barbaric things they offered my uncles 26 years before in 1978. And they did everything the doctor said and died within the first year. And I was like, okay, so that's ridiculous. There have to be people on the earth, don't know who they are, don't know where they are, don't know how to find them, but they have to exist who have knowledge about how to have a healthy body. And if you have a healthy body, all that stuff goes away. And so I just simply made a request. I would love to be led to these people because I know I can't find them. You could pay me all the money in the world, give me $10 billion, I would never find them. I had to be led. And it was just very slow. I had about 3 years left to live according to these institutions. So I was like, okay, 3 years. Maybe we just use that 3 years to get 5 years. If we can learn enough in that 3-year period, maybe I could get 5 years to have a little more bandwidth. And so it went like that. And I couldn't rush it. I wanted to rush it. I wanted to learn everything all at once, but you can't. Because even mentally and emotionally, I could only take so much at a time. So it was way down the trail before I found out about leptin. But I was ready. And it rocked my world. I had to process it for a while. I was like, no, really? Like, after all I learned and all I learned about all these different ways of eating and all these protocols and now this, but in my gut, I knew that it was true. That was the thing. I just knew. I had this instinct that this is the truth. And within this 40 years of work and research and implementation for 25 years of that 40 years that proved all the physical results are undeniable. So the question had to come, do I actually want to go this direction? And the answer was yes, because I was ready. I would never go and say, you should do this. I would just simply share where the information is, and then you do whatever you want. It's like we talked about master keys. So if I do my job right, I make sure you get the keys that I was given. I give you the keys that I was given. I don't follow up and look, breathe down your neck and make sure you're doing everything. That's none of my business. It's your body. It's your life. You choose. And then you make the decisions. But my job was to go and find the keys and be led to them and gather them, make sure there were no keys that didn't fit together. And then now we're ready to share this with the world as of 2024. So you've got keys within your system that you're sharing with people all the time. And if you do your job right, they don't even need you. They need you for a little bit, but you're always having new people coming in. I'm not worried about running out of people. There's 8 billion people. And to even serve 1/80th of 1% is a million people. Could you imagine being responsible to serve a million people right now? And you would have to manufacture physical products for them. It's a 3 billion revenue business per year you have to support just to serve 1 million people. People spend about $10 a day on their health. And when they spend it in the right place, then it has all the effect. Some people spend $40, $50, $60. Wealthy people spend hundreds of dollars a day. And so it's $10 is the must-have. And I love what you're doing, being it's free, it doesn't cost money. Maybe people pay you for your course to cover your cost and you have a business, that's awesome, but that's still the value they're getting is 10x over what they're having to pay money-wise.
Exactly. Well, if you take it and if you take what is given to you, you can do it on your own for sure. At least with the yoga practice, for sure. But I'm so curious. So I want to learn more about the leptin thing. Is that part of your salt thing as well?
No, this is a separate thing. I just refer
right?
people to because I am not. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm just the one enjoying it. Yeah, because you can't become someone who has done work for 40 years. That's what I love about research. When I met the people, I was like, wow, that they spent a lifetime learning this stuff, and they're willing to share that. Can you imagine if I had to go do 40 years of research? I'd never find it anyway. So my research was research the researchers, stand on the shoulder of giants and then put the puzzles together. I can't take credit for any of it.